Hello everyone. In a previous video we discussed about a deployment object, and in this video we will be discussing about a service object defining in a declarative way. So in one of the previous video we had discussed that without a service object, deployment object cannot be exposed to a cluster or to the outer world. So service object is a necessary evil that we definitely need to create for exposing the deployment object and the pod inside that. So what we will do is we will define our service object in the same file deployment.yaml. So the way you can do is we can define multiple object in the same YAML file. We have to separate the file with a three dashes. This makes sure that and Kubernetes will understand that these are two separate objects. So similarly, we will do it. Now there are many, some of the parts of the initial deployment objects are same as a service object as well. For example, the API version, kind, and metadata we can define it, but here the API version is different. In a deployment object, the API version was apps.f/v1, but here it is just the v1. Similarly, the kind is service and the metadata. The metadata we can provide the name that we want. Here, the metadata name may be service. So this defines it. So here we don't need a label, so we will get rid of that. Now, similar to the deployment object, we also need to specify the specs. Inside this one, the first tag we can specify is a selector, and selector name is same as what we have defined in the selector of the deployment objects. So as we want this selector to be picked, we are choosing this selector name. So this is all about the selector, and then we need to specify the type of the service object that we need. So earlier, as we have discussed, that there are three different types: load balancer, then cluster IP, and node port. So we discuss about that. The cluster IP is the one that defines and also expose the particular container into the cluster. The node port is very similar to cluster IP, but it uses the IP address of the container, that is the pod. And load balancer is the one that we use for exposing the application, exposing the pod to the outer world. And then in our case, we want to use a load balancer, so because we want to expose this API to the outer world. And then we define the ports, the internal ports and the outer external ports that we need to use for the service objects. So again, this can be a list, so we have to indent two spaces further, and then we provide the protocol. The protocol is by default it is a TCP protocol that we want to use. Then the port that we want to, that is the internal port of the deployment object. Sorry about that. The internal port of the pod that we want to use, that is used here 8081, and the target port that we want to expose to the outer world. This is all we need for the service object. Now we have created a service object and the deployment object. The service object will expose the pods defined in the deployment objects. So the way we can run it is similar to the one we had defined for the deployment object. So we use the kubectl apply -f and deployment. So both the things as we have defined into the same file, we should be able to start a deployment and the pods defined into the deployment and also the service expose that with the service object. So let us hit that and see it what happens. Kubectl get pods. So the pod has started running and then kubectl deployment. The deployment is also started and also let us check services. So now our services also been started and our service type is a load balancer and it is exposing the port 8081. Let us go to the postman and see we are able to hit that applications and we are successfully able to hit the applications. With the help of the Kubernetes manifest files, we are successfully able to create the deployment object and the service object. In a deployment object and a service object, we can add more things like in the deployment object, we can add details of the volume to be used or also if there are some variable environment variable or something, we also can specify in the deployment object. I hope you have enjoyed learning about the deployment object and the service objects. So thank you very much for watching this video.